What if I told you that the entire bloody, brilliant, and utterly chaotic story of Europe could be boiled down to just a handful of forces that shaped everything from your morning coffee to the phone in your pocket? Forget everything you think you know about European history, because we're about to uncover the hidden puppet masters that built and destroyed empires, sparked world wars, and created the modern world as we know it. Welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the stories that actually matter. Today we're tackling something absolutely massive, the complete history of Europe through the lens of the forces that truly drove everything. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at a map the same way again. Let's start with a shocking truth. Europe as we know it today is basically an accident. A beautiful, complex, utterly fascinating accident that came about because of 5 major forces that have been playing cosmic chess with human civilization for over 2,000 years. These forces didn't just influence European history, they created it, destroyed it, and rebuilt it over and over again. The first force that shaped everything was geography itself. Picture this. You have a continent that's basically a giant peninsula jutting out into the Atlantic, riddled with mountains, rivers, and natural barriers that created perfect little pockets for different groups to develop their own cultures, languages, and eventually nations. The Mediterranean Sea in the south, the Atlantic Ocean to the west, the English Channel creating an island fortress, the Alps cutting Italy off from northern Europe, and the vast plains of Eastern Europe stretching endlessly toward Asia. This geography created something unique in human history, a continent where cooperation and conflict were equally inevitable. The Romans figured this out first. They realized that if you could control the Mediterranean, you could control the known world. And for centuries, that's exactly what they did. The Roman Empire wasn't just about military conquest. It was about understanding that geography creates destiny. But here's where it gets interesting. When Rome fell in the 5th century, that same geography that made their empire possible also made it impossible to maintain. The barbarian tribes flooding in from the north and east weren't just random invaders. They were following geographical pathways that had existed for thousands of years. The Goths, Vandals, and Huns were flowing along river valleys, through mountain passes, and across plains that geography had carved out like highways. This brings us to our second massive force, religion. And I'm not just talking about Christianity here. I'm talking about the way religious ideas became political weapons, economic systems, and cultural identities all rolled into one explosive package. When Constantine converted to Christianity in the 4th century, he wasn't just having a personal spiritual awakening. He was recognizing that this new religion had something the old Roman system lacked: the ability to unite diverse populations under a single ideological umbrella. Christianity spread along those same geographical pathways, but it also created something entirely new: a European identity that transcended tribal and ethnic boundaries. Fast forward to the medieval period, and you see this playing out in incredible ways. The Catholic Church becomes the first truly European institution. Monasteries preserve knowledge through the Dark Ages. The Pope crowns Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor, essentially creating the idea of a Christian Europe. The Crusades channel European military energy outward toward the Middle East, creating shared experiences and cultural exchange. But then something fascinating happens. The very success of Christianity creates its own problems. The Great Schism of 1054 splits Eastern and Western Christianity permanently. The Protestant Reformation of the 16th century shatters Catholic unity. Religious wars devastate the continent for over a century. The force that once unified Europe becomes the force that tears it apart. This is where our third force comes roaring onto the scene: economics and trade. Medieval Europe was essentially a collection of agricultural societies with minimal long-distance trade. But starting around the 11th century, something revolutionary begins happening. The Crusades, ironically, open up new trade routes to Asia. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa become incredibly wealthy by controlling Mediterranean commerce. The Hanseatic League creates a massive trading network across northern Europe. Money changes everything. Suddenly, kings need merchants as much as merchants need kings. Banking families like the Medici become more powerful than many nobles. Trade routes become strategic assets worth fighting wars over. The discovery of the Americas floods Europe with gold and silver, completely transforming the economic landscape. But here's the crucial part. Economic competition drives technological innovation. Europeans become obsessed with finding better ways to navigate, better weapons to fight with, better methods of production. The printing press revolutionizes information. Improved agriculture supports larger populations. Better shipbuilding enables global exploration. By the 15th and 16th centuries, Europeans are sailing around Africa to reach Asia, crossing the Atlantic to reach the Americas, and establishing trading posts and colonies across the globe. Europe transforms from a backwater peninsula into the center of the first truly global economic system. This economic expansion brings us to our fourth force: nationalism and state building. For most of European history, people identified with their local lord, their church, or their trade guild. The idea of belonging to something called France or England or Spain was pretty abstract for most people. But as kingdoms grew wealthier and more centralized, something new emerged: the modern nation-state. Kings started claiming divine right to rule. They built standing armies loyal to the crown rather than local nobles. They standardized languages, laws, and currencies. They promoted national myths and symbols. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648, ending the devastating 30 Years' War, essentially codifies this new system. Sovereign nation-states with defined borders and non-interference in each other's internal affairs become the organizing principle of European politics. This sounds reasonable until you realize it also legitimizes the idea that nations have interests that justify almost any action. Nationalism becomes the most powerful political force in European history. It drives the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. It fuels the unification of Germany and Italy. It tears apart multi-ethnic empires like Austria-Hungary and Ottoman Turkey. It provides the ideological fuel for 2 world wars. But nationalism also drives incredible achievements. National pride funds universities, museums, and scientific research. Competition between nations accelerates technological development. The desire to prove national superiority motivates exploration, art, and literature. Our fifth and final force is perhaps the most important: the constant cycle of technological and intellectual revolution. Europe becomes obsessed with innovation in ways that earlier civilizations weren't. The Renaissance rediscovers classical knowledge, but also promotes new ways of thinking about art, science, and human potential. The scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries completely transforms European understanding of the natural world. Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and others don't just make discoveries. They create new methods for making discoveries. The scientific method becomes a European export to the rest of the world. The Enlightenment takes this further, applying rational thinking to politics, economics, and society. Ideas about individual rights, democratic government, and economic freedom emerge from European thinkers and spread globally. The Industrial Revolution transforms European society from agricultural to industrial in just a few generations. But here's what makes European history so fascinating. These 5 forces never work in isolation. They're constantly interacting, reinforcing each other, and sometimes contradicting each other in spectacular ways. Take the example of the Napoleonic Wars. Geography explains why Napoleon could conquer most of continental Europe, but couldn't successfully invade Britain or Russia. Religious differences helped motivate resistance to French rule in Catholic Spain and Orthodox Russia. Economic factors drove British opposition to Napoleon's continental system. Nationalism both helped Napoleon recruit armies and eventually turn those same populations against French occupation. And technological innovation in artillery, logistics, and communication made Napoleon's rapid campaigns possible. Or consider the causes of World War I. Geographic competition for colonies creates tensions between European powers. Religious and cultural differences fuel nationalism in the Balkans. Economic rivalry, especially between Britain and Germany, increases diplomatic tensions. Technological advances in railroads, telegraphs, and weapons make massive armies and rapid mobilization possible. All 5 forces converge to create the most devastating war in human history up to that point. The story doesn't end with the World Wars. The Cold War divides Europe along ideological lines that roughly correspond to old religious boundaries between Western and Eastern Christianity. Economic integration through the European Union attempts to transcend nationalist divisions by creating shared prosperity. Technological revolution through computers, internet, and artificial intelligence is once again transforming European society. Today, Europe faces new challenges that echo old patterns. Immigration is changing demographic composition in ways that challenge traditional national identities. Economic inequality is growing within and between European countries. Climate change requires international cooperation that nation-states struggle to achieve. Technological disruption is eliminating traditional jobs while creating new forms of social connection and political organization. But perhaps most importantly, Europe is no longer the center of global economic and political power the way it was for several centuries. China, India, and other regions are reasserting themselves as major players in world affairs. Europeans are having to figure out how to maintain influence and prosperity in a multipolar world. The five forces that shaped European history, geography, religion, economics, nationalism, and technological innovation, are still active today. They're just operating in a more complex global context, where European actions have worldwide consequences, and worldwide developments directly impact European societies. Understanding these forces helps us make sense of current events in ways that daily news coverage often misses. When you see tensions over immigration, think about how geography has always made Europe a crossroads between different populations. When you see conflicts over economic policy within the European Union, remember how economic competition has driven European development for centuries. When you see the rise of populist political movements, consider how nationalism has always been Europe's most powerful and most dangerous political force. The story of Europe is ultimately the story of human beings trying to build better societies while dealing with the constraints and opportunities that geography, technology, economics, religion, and political organization create. It's a story of incredible achievements and terrible failures, often simultaneously. What makes European history so compelling is that it's not really finished. The same forces that created medieval Christendom, Renaissance city-states, Enlightenment philosophy, Industrial Revolution, and modern democracy are still working today. They're just operating at a faster pace and on a global scale. The next chapter of European history is being written right now, and it will be shaped by how successfully Europeans adapt their historical strengths, innovation, diversity, cooperation, and competition, to contemporary challenges like climate change, technological disruption, demographic change, and global economic integration. So, the next time someone tells you history is boring or irrelevant, remind them that the forces that built and destroyed empires, sparked scientific revolutions, and created the modern world are still shaping our lives today. Understanding European history isn't just about appreciating the past, it's about preparing for the future. That's our deep dive into the forces that shaped European history from ancient Rome to the present day. What do you think is the most important force we discussed? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see more videos exploring how historical forces shape our modern world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.